It is 2 a.m., and my son needs to poop. He is 4 months old, and I can tell by how much he's squirming in the middle of his nighttime bottle that he really needs to go. I love it when he poops. As he works on it in the crook of my arm, I think about how the world would be a better place if everyone was allowed to poop like he does. You're in a meeting at work, or you're having drinks with friends, and then you feel it. You wriggle and gyrate. You kick your legs, trying to alleviate the pressure. You grunt loudly, shut your eyes hard, bear down, then... And immediately after, you sigh. This beautiful, sweet release. Before this, you had just one concern, and now it's gone. You're free of it. You have pooped, and you are alive. And because you're in the presence of others, after you've pooped, everyone cheers. They're thrilled for your achievement. It's the greatest thing they have ever heard, witnessed, or smelled, and nothing could possibly make them happier. If everyone got such joy from pooping like this, I can't imagine wars would still exist. My son fusses. While my mind wandered, I let the bottle tip away from his mouth. Sorry about that, little man. There you go. He resumes gulping and closes his little hand around my finger as if in gratitude. I always wanted to be a dad, but I was in no rush to check that box. I liked my life how it was. I'd found a partner to spend it with, and we enjoyed movies, board games, and obscenely expensive gourmet tacos. At some point... I figured Sarah and I would have the conversation about starting up. Wait, what'd you say? You're pregnant now? With a baby? At least one of them? Everything about our life is going to be different in less than a year? There's no right age to start a family. But I liked the idea of doing it before I turned 40. I didn't want to be the dad who couldn't play with his kid because his knees were shot. At least I was thinking about playtime. I gave myself credit for anticipating things that I'd gain instead of lamenting things I'd lose. It seemed healthier to imagine my kid riding a bike or going to their first baseball game than mourning the loss of my late-night video game sessions, rock shows in smelly bars, and taking way too long in the bathroom. But merely thinking about my impending fatherhood was all I did. I didn't plan much. I didn't research strollers or cribs. A friend sent me a dense book on childbirth with a sticky note attached. You have to read this. And I actually took joy in watching it collect dust on a shelf. I started to think there was something wrong with me when I didn't cry at Sarah's first ultrasound. Every father-to-be is supposed to cry when he sees that fuzzy black and white blob, right? It should be the most magnificent image he's ever seen. He's supposed to grab his wife's hand, kiss her fiercely, and cry all over her face. Maybe the doctor cries too. I take comfort remembering that Sarah didn't cry either, but she didn't have to. Her response was more memorable than a mess of tears could ever be. When a vaguely skeletal shape appeared on the monitor, she gasped, looked at the blob, and said, "Yeah, bud." I just stood there and let the surrealism in. That was my child. And in a matter of months, he would be here. But that could wait. Leaving the hospital in the late afternoon, I figured it was close enough to dinner time. You want to get some tacos? I asked Sarah. Hell yeah. God, I love this woman. Lime wedges, pickled onions, spicy carrots, chips, and 6 different types of salsa lay between us as we thought about being parents. The demands ahead of us, the sleepless nights, tantrums, diapers bearing increasingly weird loads. We also entertained hypotheticals. What traditions would we have? How would we discipline him? How young is too young before his first Quentin Tarantino movie? We indulged in the idea of being parents, but mostly we indulged in the tacos. One night, Sarah reclined on the couch, her enormous belly promising our new lives while I gave her a foot massage. I looked at the book on childbirth my friend had given me, still ignored on the shelf. Should we read that? I asked. It's just going to stress me out. Me too. I kept massaging her feet. The only thing I really spent time on was his name. After we found out we were having a boy, we installed a baby name app and entertained ourselves with its more hilarious offerings. Werner, Ulysses, Zach, but spelled with an X for some reason. We wanted something unique yet classic, preferably Irish. We pitched and pondered and debated before agreeing on Killian. It had an old world sound, an ancestral ring to it. It was nickname proof. It was easy to pronounce. Look at us. We just made an actual decision about this whole parenting business. Now all it was left to do was knock out this whole labor and delivery thing, and baby Killian would be here. The due date crept closer. The due date came and went. Any day now, bud. Time to breathe the free air. No? Don't want to come out? That's all right, Killian. You take all the time you... Oh, okay, you've got an induction date. You're now an entry in our Google Calendar. In the delivery room, a doctor recommended we write the name on a whiteboard. I took the marker, and in big block letters, I wrote out Cillian. Later, the same doctor came in, looked at the board, and said, "We're all looking forward to meeting Cillian." Come on! The one thing I devoted an insane amount of time worrying about, and the first person to notice fucked it up. Seriously, had no one seen Oppenheimer that year? Annoyed, I took the dry erase marker and wrote out the phonetic way to pronounce my son's name. Problem solved. Killian's delivery was not an easily solved problem. I have never felt more useless than standing next to Sarah as she labored to push our son out of her body. I thought of the unread book on childbirth my friend gave me, still on the shelf at home. She pushed until it became clear she needed a C-section. Doctors and nurses fluttered about, and they told me I had 3 minutes to collect our belongings, see who I needed to see, and call who I needed to call. Oh, and by the way, they said, you will be in the room with your wife as we open her abdomen and withdraw your infant son from his uterine enclosure. I definitely should have read the goddamn book. I went out into the lobby where my mother and sister-in-law waited, weary and bored like underpaid security guards. When I saw Sarah's mom and sister, the situation suddenly took on all the weight I neglected to consider. I collapsed into my mother-in-law and cried. Every tear I didn't cry at the ultrasound. I cried because we hadn't even thought about a C-section. I cried because I forgot the Taylor Swift music that Sarah had requested in the delivery room. It's all right. You can laugh at that one. Despite every doctor telling me how safe C-sections were and how our son was definitely going to be born today, I was afraid that something would go wrong, something unspeakable. My mother-in-law let me go. "It's going to be okay," she said. Her face was forged steel. There was a stool by Sarah's head for me. She lay there, a vast expanse of plastic sheeting blooming underneath her chin, obscuring the work the surgeons were doing south of it. She closed her eyes and slowed her breathing. There were beeps, the sound of suction, the chatter of medical professionals at work. To the anesthesiologist next to us, this was just another Wednesday. In between glances at his computer terminal, he asked me if I'd seen any good shows lately. Mr. and Mrs. Smith was pretty good, I said. That's on Netflix, right? Amazon, Sarah said. I'll have to check it out. Let's see here. Your baby's name is... He looked at the computer again. Oh, Killian. I love that name. Finally, a doctor who'd seen Oppenheimer. And then he was there. The sheet lowered and I saw my son for the first time. Gray skin covered in fluid and membrane. his dark eyes without color and a befuddled look on his face that suggested he somehow knew he entered this world through the side door rather than the main entrance. I held him next to Sarah's face as the doctors closed her up. She whispered to him words I couldn't hear. I was crying too loudly. But those words weren't for me anyway. They were for them. The private exchange between a mother and child, both of whom battled their way to this moment. It was like my mother-in-law said. Everything was okay. It made no difference to the doctors whether I planned or worried enough. It didn't matter how many books I didn't read or how many tacos I ate. Killian was here. He had my hairline. It was the first thing that made us laugh. Fresh from surgery, Sarah nursed him, and we both smiled at the idea that by the time he was 30, his hair would start to recede. 4 months, 7 hours, and 15 minutes later, it's now 2:15 a.m., and my son still needs to poop. He's taking his time with this bottle. I let out a big gaping yawn, loud enough to catch his attention. He tilts his eyes up at me in between gulps, and I see judgment there, as if he's annoyed I'd ruined his concentration. He closes his eyes and grunts again. I look around the room. It used to be my office. I grumbled about the fact that a person 1/10 my size kicked me out of the room I had all to myself. But seeing my bookshelf in the corner makes me smile now. On its shelves are Cormac McCarthy novels, a book about Comanche warriors, an account about the Second Battle of Fallujah, a 1,000-page tome about the air war in the South Pacific, and the 9/11 Commission report. That is definitely my son's bookshelf now. Killian finishes the bottle. Milk drunk, he closes his eyes, as if overwhelmed by the simple satisfaction of no longer being hungry. I bring him up to my shoulder, and he snuggles against me as I pat his back to make him burp. But he doesn't burp. He scrunches his little legs up, gives one hard grunt, is silent for a moment, and then... Then he sighs. Sweet, soothing gastrointestinal relief. I change his diaper and zip up his onesie. His eyes are closed as he pinches my arm hair, and I put him back down in his crib. He flips over, face plants into the mattress, and falls asleep. I love this. I love being his dad. I'm fantastically tired, but feeding him brings me joy that cancels out my exhaustion. I love his name, even though at his first pediatric appointment, a nurse called him Sicilian. One day, he'll correct someone who pronounces it wrong. Maybe he'll become a surly teenager who resents his parents for naming him something weird. In an act of rebellion, maybe he'll decide to go by his middle name and his parents will only call him Killian when he's in trouble. But for now, Killian is okay. Killian is asleep. Killian has pooped. I return to bed next to his mom, and I think about what our family should do that day. Maybe we should get tacos for lunch. Thank you so much.
Brent Hannify, ladies and gentlemen. Brent Hannify.